How about continuing? Repovž, daj pokliči ljudi malo noter tam, nič ne čuje. Okay, gremo. Okay, let's continue with the conference and the second third of the presentations. We have 3 presentations now, starting with Mike Benedus, who will introduce the blaufränkisch movement in New Jersey, which is a bit of a surprise, but let's see. Mike, welcome to the stage. Please.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. It's a bit of a surprise for me to be here too. In Sevnica, sort of breaking bread with the kings and queens of blaufränkisch. We have a very limited experience with the grape, but I'm happy to share our experience that we've had so far, the experience in my region, and maybe a bit about the perspective or the perception of blaufränkisch from the American consumer side. So the first answer to the question I know you're all thinking is yes, we do grow blaufränkisch in the United States. Most of our wine regions really are located on the coasts. So on the West Coast, obviously you have California. California produces about 90% of the volume of wine produced in the United States. So by volume and quantity, they're far and above, the leaders. Above that, you have Oregon and Washington. Washington is all the way up northwest. They actually had some of the earliest plantings of blaufränkisch in the United States. Back in the 60s and 70s, they were starting to experiment with the grape. It really started to catch on during those years. Unfortunately, in the last decade or two, they're starting to rip out blaufränkisch in favor of Cabernet Sauvignon, which breaks my heart to see. I was out there and talking with the producers, and they don't like it either. They love blaufränkisch. The wine quality is very high there. The problem is economics, and so they're starting to realize that they can plant Cabernet Sauvignon in a lot of these vineyards where blaufränkisch was previously grown, and they can get 70 or 80 euros for Cabernet Sauvignon and 30 or 40 euros for blaufränkisch, and so for them it's a hard decision to keep those vines in. On the East Coast, we have a much less developed wine region. New York is sort of the center of the wine trade in the United States, so we have an exceptionally developed market there. A very educated consumer, people have money, they want to spend money on quality wine. The local wine movements are still young and emerging, and part of that comes from Prohibition, which was about 100 years ago. America had the very silly concept that we could survive without alcohol. It did not work out very well for us, but one of the sort of aftermath of that effect was that the laws in New Jersey and a few of the states surrounding prohibited the growth of the wine industry. They actually limited the licenses of wineries in our state to 1 winery for every 1 million people. And we have about 8 or 9 million people in our state of New Jersey, so there were only 8 wineries up until the 1980s. Finally, they had the good sense to change that law, and really since then, we've seen quite a fast explosion of vineyards planting and wineries. We're blessed to have a lot of European influence, obviously, on the East Coast, especially in New Jersey. You see a lot of Italian, Portuguese, and German influence. And so we have this historical and generational knowledge of how to make wine. It's just, how do we grow the grapes in this area? That's a new question for us a bit. So I think first to mention, blaufränkisch has really come into the minds of sort of, I'll call it the New York sommelier, which is sort of the gatekeeper to the American wine industry.